the strongest curse, not really, but still, versus one of Jujutsu High's strongest sorcerers. ISB Mahito versus Kinji Hakari in a battle of one of the most glazed characters in the community against one of the most overlooked in the community, and I hope to enlighten you on my views as to why Mahito, especially in instant spirit body of disordered killing, is a monster in every meaning of the word, and may even beat the gambling prodigy. Starting off with Hakari, to be honest, there's not much to go off of for AP. So for AP, being honest, there isn't really anything, even statement-wise. I suggest watching my video on Yuta versus Toji for an explanation as to why this matters. But within the fight against Urame, she states that Hakari surpasses Gojo and Sukuna in regeneration and nothing else. So he physically can't be hitting harder than Yuta with Curse Energy Reinforcement, as I'm explained in the aforementioned video, in which Yuta would be hitting harder than Gojo with just raw CE reinforced punches. So statement-wise, he scales nowhere in AP either. Granted, what I mean by this is he has no high-end scaling for AP. Even if you argue Urame is strong, Hakari's attacks that we see do literally no damage to her, so that hardly matters. The only real AP showings we see from Hakari are against a pre-Culling Games Yuji, this Yuji being unquantifiably stronger than he was in Shibuya, but he shouldn't be insane at this point. Hakari has no reason to be holding back here, as he thinks Itadori is a spy, and he specifically flares up his cursed energy during the fight before attacking more. He even gets surprised when Yuji gets up after taking the hits, this being a Yuji that he knows is there on orders from his senpai, which would have to be someone that like Yuta, considering the only other senpai are Maki, who verbatim would never work with Hakari under normal circumstances, and Panda, who just isn't relevant at that point in the story, and nobody would go chasing after a supposed high-tier character on Panda's orders. So Hakari at the very least has expectations of Yuji, thinks he's a spy, and flares up his cursed energy, that paired with Hakari's natural tendency to just pretty much always go all out with his attacks, which is just plenty of basis to claim Hakari's hitting Yuji with his full force. This shouldn't really change in Jackpot, since Jackpot isn't changing his maximum output, it simply gives him an infinite reserve of cursed energy to pull from. Another thing worth noting is Hakari just probably isn't a special grade. Even in Volume 0, when Hakari should still be a student at Jujutsu High, which we know he was due to the connections to Maki, Panda, and Yuta, so he had to have been a student at the time of the events of Volume 0. But back to it, in Volume 0 there are still only 4 special grades: Gojo, Geto, Yuki, and Yuta. This means that Hakari, while registered in the system, couldn't have been a special grade at the time. Sure, you can argue he got stronger after leaving Jujutsu High, but he just isn't a special grade, so he gets none of that narrative scaling. Speed-wise, Hakari, when going all out, as I mentioned before, was getting reacted to by the pre-Culling Games Yuji, and later in the fight, Yuji was verbatim choosing to let himself get hit, which implies he could have continued blocking and dodging. This is pretty consistent with Urame just being surprised at the speed of piercing blood. He's also stayed to surpass Shibuya Mahito in speed, and let me explain later why, even though that may sound like a clear-cut Hakari being faster statement, I think it's the opposite. This statement implies a level of relevancy to this Mahito's speed, which Mahito being a weakened base Mahito, who is at less than 40% of his output, but I'll be explaining again later why this means Mahito should be faster here in the Mahito section. Ability-wise, Hakari has insane regen and longevity due to Jackpot, and his domain expansion should be better at clashing than a normal domain. But this is pretty much it for Hakari's abilities though. Now for Mahito, it gets a little buggy in ISB, like he goes crazy. AP-wise, he's at least twice as strong in his base state, meaning he's significantly stronger than end of Shibuya Yuji, as Yuji is pretty much relative to base Mahito at this point, if not slightly weaker. I say this because Mahito just blatantly tanks multiple Black Flashes from Yuji, in which Yuji is left in shambles after one Mahito Black Flash, these characters having to scale to their own physical AP due to Newton's third law. And Mahito just blatantly fights Yuji and Toda at the same time and is winning, so he'd basically have to scale above them individually. With Mahito being weakened the entire fight while fighting Yuji one-on-one due to having his duplicates out and receiving the resonance from Nobara. So even saying Yuji post Shibuya was in like a 120% state like he happens to be post Black Flash, he'd still be significantly weaker than this Mahito. So Mahito should be physically stronger here given that Hakari scales like a little bit above post Shibuya Yuji, but Naito is at bare minimum nearly twice that Yuji in power. And it's blatantly stated that ISB Mahito shreds end of Shibuya Yuji to pieces. And also, Yuji by pre-Culling Games doesn't necessarily have to be stronger than end of Shibuya. since Choso's statement can absolutely be in reference to during his fight with Yuji, so that would just upscale pre-culling games Yuji beyond the Choso fight Yuji, which is before multiple Black Flashes and Resolve Amps, so it makes sense. Speed-wise, Mahito's 200% statement should just be very simply applying to speed as well, since he blitzes Yuji in ISB, with him and Yuji being at least somewhat relative in speed prior. But now let's go back to the statement I mentioned earlier in Hakari's section. Hakari being stayed faster than Mahito. Why this matters to Mahito's speed directly is for two reasons. This feat being referenced as being done by a 40% Mahito is being used in a light that puts emphasis on how impressive Mahito's feat is, even at this point in the series. The series is using Mahito's feat as a metric to measure Hakari's feat, implying relevancy to the Mahito feat, in which Mahito would simply be in that tier while at 40%, meaning ISB being at least 5 times faster than this would make him significantly faster than Hakari as well. And bringing up other feats from earlier in Hakari's section, Yuji is able to pretty easily block and dodge Hakari's attacks when he was actually combating Hakari, this Yuji being caught off guard. As I mentioned before though, Mahito blitzed a Yuji that at worst shouldn't be that much weaker than this one. So ISB Mahito being this fast shouldn't be inconsistent at all, especially considering nobody at this point actually really scaled to ISB Mahito directly, as just verbatim stated that it wouldn't have stood a chance prior without the surprise Black Flash. And Mahito was already nerfed from the prior fight since he was hit with multiple Black Flashes and was hit with soul damage from Yuji's punches and resonance. Ability-wise, I don't think I should really have to explain why Mahito is superior, but let's look it over anyways. Mahito can't be hurt by Hakari in general, as his attacks just don't target the soul. Mahito can use Idle Transfiguration to just nullify Jackpot's instant RCT from even mattering. Mahito can alter his body to be insanely versatile in combat, and has insane adaptability learning for very fast, even during a confrontation. Mahito also has domain expansion, in which while Hakari's domain is supposedly better for domain clashes than a normal domain due to its makeup, this can be countered by the fact that Mahito's actual domain refinement feats, which would counteract Hakari's being conventionally better against normal domains, as Mahito's is just straight up better than a normal domain as well, and has quantifiable reasoning as to how his domain stacks up. So Mahito is stronger, he's faster, he's smarter, and he's better. Not much else to talk about since he has direct counter to Jackpot. Hakari can't hit him as his domain doesn't have a sure hit. Hakari is slower and physically weaker, and Mahito just kinda one-slaps, literally. So call it glaze if you want, just make sure you give actual reasoning as to why I'm wrong, or I don't really feel the need to interact with your comment. Saw this a lot on the Gogeta vs. Kaba vid and the Mahito vs. Jogo vid. Just make sure you give actual argumentation, and I promise I am willing to listen and discuss the topic peacefully, if that's the energy being sent my way. Also, while I've discussed with people on Instagram before, I've never promoted it here in a video. So if you really want to discuss it in a better and easier setting that allows scans and even calls to explain your points better, my Instagram is available, and I encourage DMing me on there. See you all and have a great rest of your day.